My name is Shlomo Nimrodi. I'm the CEO of the Business Engagement Center of Tel Aviv University, which is the largest research institution in the state of Israel, known also for being the most multidisciplinary. And I think when some people talk about or mention multidisciplinary, this is it. I mean, what you guys are doing, the fact that there are, more than 120 labs across the campus, spanning from the medical school to the life sciences, to the exact sciences, to the engineering, to the business school, says it all. This is a truly multidisciplinary and without actually putting $50 million investment, which is quite a miracle, Dana and Uri. And my goal today is really to tell you about translational research. I mean, how you actually take early stage innovation from academic institutions to industry. And I don't think I need to tell you that most amazing innovations actually came from academic institutions. I'm talking about some of the most impactful drugs, and all the way to Facebook and flash memory and Google and MRI and PET-CT. All these technologies essentially started in academic environments. And I think given the dynamics of the drug development cycles today, with the fact that they're getting much faster, with computational biology and sequencing being relatively very cheap, the role of academic institutions become even more significant. So you guys certainly stand to have substantial impact on mankind in the rest of your career, should you decide to continue your career, of course. So as I mentioned, Tel Aviv University is the largest research institution, and it's important to mention that because, you know, there is a true competition to bring good scientists back to Israel, especially Israelis. And it seems like what is the biggest selling point of this institution is what exactly you see here. The fact that there are multiple disciplines sometimes is more advantageous than getting more dollars for research in another institution. I met yesterday Karmit from the medical school. You know Karmit, right? You know her? Okay. Anyhow, she's been 5 years. She came from Harvard University. And she had different choices, and she decided to choose this one. 5 years later, she's obviously extremely happy. And when you ask her why, this is one of the main reasons. While the university is a government-sponsored university, we spend every year close to $200 million in research and development. This is money that is coming from all sorts of no strings attached, whether it's EU, whether it's all sorts of grants that are being given by the government, the chief scientist, royalties that are coming back. This is money that enable scientists to actually do basic science, okay? Almost all this money is targeted toward the basic science. Almost none of it actually is going toward translational, and which is really highlight the challenge that academic institutions are basically facing. At any given point in time, we have close to 2,000 research and development projects. Many of them involve multiple scientists from different parts of the campus. We talked about multidisciplinary. I think this is a good chart that actually shows you the multiple disciplines that we have here. And again, I think that breaking the silos in academic environment is always a challenge. I mean, the engineers think that the computer science guys are not that smart, and the medical school guys think that the life science guys really don't know anything about true medical treatment, et cetera, et cetera. And I think those that will actually leave those egos aside will be more successful than others. I want to mention two of them. I already talked about Sagol School of Neuroscience, and I think this is really a true example of, in less than 5 years, I think.
5 years.
5 years and less than 5 million. We're able to actually put together this amazing network. Secondly, which is we're privileged to have Professor Prof Gazit here, who you're going to make a presentation later on, so I'm not going to present you. But Udi actually, which has been with the university for many, many years, have carried positions like the chief scientist of the State of Israel, in the government, being the VP of R&D here, and being the chairman of my organization, Ramot, was recently tasked with the mission to establish a drug discovery center, which essentially includes 3 legs. One of them is the medicinal chemistry, which is so much lacking in or needed in drug development, and something we didn't have, now we're going to have it. Secondly, high throughput screening that really allows to identify target and from targets to get to certain hits. And last but not least, the ability to use computational biology, computer-aided design for drug discovery. Those are kind of the 3 holy grail principles, if you will, of drug discovery. And the fact that we have this center, and in fact it was just announced last week, we're walking baby steps, but this is certainly miles away from where this institution was just a week ago in terms of disability. So I think, again, another reason to be happy about the fact you are part of this institution. Needless to say that being here in the center does give us substantial benefits. I mean, it is the place of choice for many people that are coming back. Multinational have got offices around us. Unfortunately, right now, more on the high-tech side, much less on the biotech side. I mean, if you look at the equation, the high-tech number of multinationals is substantially much more significant, but we're working very hard to change it. I mean, today you can find here Merck Serono, you can find J&J, you can find Takeda, you can find ObiMed. These are all Pontifax, these are all institutions that invest in early stage innovation and can certainly be the go-to partners for any one of your ideas. Anyone here knows what tech transfer is? I'll show you a short video.
Universities, hospitals, and research centers conduct a lot of research that generates groundbreaking inventions that not only save lives, but improve the way we live, work, and play on a daily basis. Technology transfer plays a central role in bringing these ideas from the lab to the market. Hi, I'm Jane Muir, a technology transfer professional and a member of the Association of University Technology Managers, or AUTM. We're the people who work to transfer the discoveries developed at universities and research centers to companies that can turn them into products and services that benefit society. This process is called technology transfer. Government and private organizations provide funding that supports critical research from which new discoveries are created. Technology transfer professionals work to protect these discoveries and create partnerships to help these discoveries become new products. This sounds simple, but there are many steps involved in taking an idea and turning it into a product. There are many challenges. Some ideas make it, some don't. Sometimes an idea is transferred to an existing company, and sometimes it inspires the creation of a brand new company. These companies turn these ideas into products that have a huge impact on improving lives, creating jobs, and supporting new research discoveries. To learn more about the AUTM Better World project and the many ways that technology transfer is making the world a better place in your community, visit AUTM at autumn.net.
So this is really give you kind of an iceberg view on how technology transfer offices works in other academic institutions. It's not so much different in Tel Aviv University. There are 4, I would say, pillars that I want to talk about. The first one is obviously the intellectual property. The first interaction that a scientist and inventor has is typically meeting with our IP specialists. They would come, they will present the idea, and in some cases they would actually say, great idea, let's move on to start the patent process, and we'll file for a provisional application. And in many cases we'll actually send back the scientist and say, hey, there is a prior art, or hey, there is not enough data, you need to come back with more information to support your claims, or the claims are too narrow, etc., etc., etc. This expertise actually resides within our office, and in many cases, in fact more often than not, we approach experts from the outside pending the field of expertise. And this is obviously very, very important, because at the end of the day, we're not selling products, we're actually commercializing IP. So if the IP is not robust and strong enough, it doesn't help much along the way. Just in terms of some numbers, we have close to 600 families of patents. When I say family, it's individual technology. Those families then are filed in different countries, obviously. I can tell you that about 50% from these families of patents came about in the last 5 years, which an indication or kind of an indication of the fact that we got many new scientists, younger scientists, that are more aware of writing patents and actually bringing their innovation beyond the publication, but actually to mankind. About 30%, close to 200 of those 580 is licensed, which means, as you heard earlier, either to an existing company or to a new company that was newly formed around this IP. And there are actually 55 active startups. And in this regard, I can tell you that this week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, the Biomed conference is taking place in David Intercontinental. For the first time ever, the tech transfer in Israel received a one-day full track of tech transfers. I am actually chairing, Tel Aviv University is chairing this event. The first half of the day is a startup competition. There are 200 active startups in healthcare area from the academic institutions in Israel. We actually did a competition. We allowed everybody to participate. 50 companies have filed. 10 of them actually won, were selected to be the top 10. 3 of them are from here. And the competition is on Wednesday morning. The first two companies are going to get a cash prize. Never happened before. The first one is going to be selected by a group of judges, professional judges. And the second one is going to be like American Idol style with sending an SMS. And that's going to be fun. And then the second half of the day is from bench to bed, or from bed to bench, or bench to bed, depends how you look at it. 4 sessions on some of the most burning topics in today's healthcare market. So this is pretty exciting stuff. As you can see, out of the 580, about 250 are in the medicine and the life sciences, and about 71 of them are commercialized. A point of reference, which is very a strong indication on the quality of science here. If you look on the left-hand side, the blue bar represents the number of invention disclosure applications in same-size academic institutions outside of Israel in the US. And the orange represents the number of requests in Tel Aviv University. So on the left side, you see it's pretty much the same, 110, 125 or so. If you go all the way to the right, this is the conversion rate. How many families have actually were converted to granted patents? So as you can see, in our case, it's a ratio of 1 to 2. Same size universities US, it's a ratio of 1 to 4, 1 to 5, which in my opinion give a good indication on the solidness of our IP and obviously also our ability to execute on intellectual property. The second thing I want to talk about is funding research. Remember the number 180 million, close to 200? Most of it is basic science. One of the biggest challenge academic institutions have is that they're not able to actually push the technology beyond the basic science level. Why, do you ask yourself? There are 3 reasons. Number 1, lack of resources. There is not enough money for translational research. Number 2, lack of desire, and that's a challenge. You can't force anyone to do translational if they don't want to. And number 3, it's a lack of skill set. Doing a preclinical trial in a setting that would be acceptable to pharma companies is not something that anyone possesses or everyone possesses that skill. So that's an inherent challenge that every tech transfer actually have. And the way we're solving it at Tel Aviv University is by the following. First of all, we've devised a continuum of funding resources that allow us to give anywhere from $50,000 all the way to $1 million per individual technology. To bring it from the publication, peer-reviewed publication, or IP to the preclinical package, which will be comprehensive enough, attractive enough to the pharma company. Clearly, with the fact that we have the Blavatnik Center, this would allow us to move things faster and hopefully also cheaper, because Udi is going to give us everything for free. But essentially, there are 3 venues of funding that we're using today. One of them is donation. The second one is the chief scientist. Tel Aviv University is number 1 from all the other universities in terms of a program called Kamin. Kamin is a $200,000 grant. If it's a joint development with another institution, it can get up to $300,000. And this is meant to allow, indeed, advancing the technology along the value cycle. And last but not least, we have actually raised a private for-profit fund a couple of years ago called Momentum Fund with two major strategic investors as an anchor investors. One of them is Tata, the Indian company, $100+ billion company. And the second one is Temasek, a private equity or investment company from Singapore. They both put $5 million each, and the rest was invested by private investors. And the idea is to give up to $1 million to promising innovations that can be brought much further along the value chain. And what happens when you do that, the dialogue with the licensee all of a sudden changes. All of a sudden, you're actually dealing in a place which is much higher value because you're presenting an asset which is more mature. The second challenge, as I mentioned, I talked about lack of money. The second one is desire. Desire, there is nothing you can do. If a scientist doesn't want to push the technology beyond a certain level, you can't force them. You better recognize it and move on to the next scientist early on. What I'm expecting would happen over time, that people will see the success of others and will follow. And many more people actually will want to actually have an impact like their colleagues have. And lastly, the skill set. Ramot today, my team today has the professional project management capability, people that came from the drug development market for the drug development, and people that came from the high tech for the engineering part of the innovations in this campus. And these two executives or two program managers are able to sit down with the scientist and develop a roadmap or a commercialization path that will actually advance the technology. And in many cases, it will imply that we go to an outside contract research organization like a CRO to validate some of the activity that was done here at the university. As you can see, altogether, we spent in the last 3 years more than $40 million in these different type of programs. This is a Momentum Fund that I mentioned to you. It's a very unique structure. It's a structure that I'm not familiar other academic institutions are applying, and it's already paying off. We actually invested in 12 technologies so far. One of them was actually founded as a new company with Bosch and Samsung as investors. Has nothing to do with drug development. And the second one is a contrast agent to test MRI, replacing the radioactive material with a glucose-based material. This was invented, by the way, by a very young scientist, 82 years old. Quite amazing. Gil Navon, really a world-renowned scientist in this respect. And this second technology was just awarded $8 million by the EU to bring the product all the way to market, to human trials. The team that we have at Ramot, and this is very important to spend a few minutes on that, you really need to have people that can walk between both worlds. You need to have people that can actually talk scientifically and really be able to communicate with scientists in a way that would allow them to actually gain respect from the other side and really steer them toward the direction that we think is more optimal as far as commercialization. And secondly, it needs to be people that have spent many years in industry, so they can actually talk to industry when the asset comes to a level or gets to a level that is mature enough to commercialize. The role of this team is three things. It's number one, scouting for innovation. Number two, it's value enhancing. And number three, commercializing. Now, when I say scouting, it's not finding the obvious. It's actually sitting down with the scientist and say, hey, listen, this is something that you're actually shooting to have that for the brain, but guess what? It's going to have hard challenges to get into the brain. Why don't we find another indication, which is an orphan disease perhaps, something that would have a lower barrier to entry and maybe have a higher chances of being successful. In many cases, the scientist collaborates with that and accepts it and understands it. In some, it doesn't. They don't. But our goal is to work with the scientist and really figure out what's the best way to package and position this asset. That's the scouting, the value enhancement I talked about, and lastly, the commercialization. So the key team is the big bubble. As you can see, these are 4 business development executives. All of them, for example, Adi and Elisha, Adi is a PhD graduate from here. Elisha is a PhD graduate from Weizmann Institute. They both spent many years in industry. Adi in drug development, medical devices. Elisha in drug development, companies like Protalix and Evogen. And these guys actually can walk and move between these two worlds I would say, fluent way. Those four individuals are supported by several support functions. One of them is IP, which we already mentioned. The second one is legal. And the third one is value enhancement. And obviously, we've got also some financial support and project management capabilities. The financial model is very lucrative. Yes, you can graduate from this institution and go and have your own startup. Startup is not an easy thing to do, especially in life sciences. Most of them fails. We only hear about the successes. Most of them fail, and the percentage of failure is even much higher in life sciences. That's the nature of the beast. However, if you're in the university, you can continue to innovate. And the financial model works the following, that from every dollar that comes back through commercialization, 40 cents on every dollar goes to the inventors. If you are the only one, or if you were part of a team, 40 cents of every dollar gets allocated between the different inventors. The other 60% goes to the university, and as you can see, 1/3 of that, about 20%, goes back to research. And most of it actually can come back to your lab. Now, so there is a true alignment here. There is alignment of interest between you as scientists, inventors, the university, as the institution that hosts you, and the faculty, which is doing the research. The commercial model typically is licensing, and the reason why we license IP and not sell IP, as a government-sponsored university, we're obligated to proliferate knowledge to mankind. When you sell an asset, you lose control over it. If I sold you an immunotherapy for cancer and you decided to put it on the shelf because you want to compete against another company, I might get a nice check of $10 million, but that's it. I mean, you can actually shelve the product. Or if you are a startup and I licensed you the technology and you ran out of money, the IP goes down the toilet, and I basically lost a substantial IP, and mankind have not benefited from that. So this is why academic institutions license IP. And when we license IP, essentially we're giving the licensee exclusive rights to exploit the technology and bring it to market. And as long as they actually stick to the plan, it's for them to keep. If they fail to do it for whatever reason, whether they've decided to stop developing, whether they stopped because they couldn't continue to develop it, we can get the asset back. And Udi and Dani know it very well. We've done it several times in the past. You get the asset back, you repackage it, and you relicense it to someone else. And unfortunately, it happened multiple times. But you have to have that flexibility. So the licensing business model, as opposed to sale, is based primarily on royalties. Royalties are from actual revenues. And in pharmaceutical drugs, it's a relatively, I would say, a very acceptable common of business model, as opposed to high-tech. High-tech companies don't like to pay royalties, and there is maybe some good reason for that, because it's much harder to protect the IP. In pharmaceutical drugs, it's much easier to protect, even though challenges exist in this space as well. And we won't get into that at the moment. So it's primarily royalties. As the video mentioned, and I also mentioned that briefly in my discussion with you, there are two ways to commercialize. One is to go to a multinational, the other one to go to a startup. When it's a startup, it's a combination of royalties and equity. And we're actually acting as a founder. So that's kind of the two differences between, and there is often a question, okay, so who do you prefer to license to? An existing company or a startup company? There are multiple factors that affect this decision. First and foremost, what's the desire of the scientist? If the scientist wants to have their own startup, there is no way we can force them to actually license it to a multinational. We have to work with the scientist. Without the we call it love story. You have to have a love story between the entrepreneur and the scientist. You can't force them to work together. And that's why it's very critical that as scientists, future scientists and existing scientists, if you decide to bring something to market, you have to take into consideration that this is a continuous commitment. Okay? We'll have time for questions. This is just a selected list of multinational partners. This is, by the way, Eri Pharma. You can see here, this is a technology, and if I may, I'll just elaborate on that. This is a technology. You're going to talk about it? Udi is going to talk about it. This is one of his inventions that is now being developed by a company that focuses on the ophthalmic space, Eri Pharma. It started off from brain, and it evolved over time now to the ophthalmic area. And again, you're going to tell them the chain of the...
It started with diabetes.
Okay, excellent. Very good. And you can see the rest of the names. You can see Dexel, you can see Mers, you can see... who are the other pharma companies? Merck Serono. There are many companies that we actually have been working with, and with most of them successfully. This is a selected list of startups that were founded based on Tel Aviv University scientists. We have today 55 active startups. I would say about 30 or so out of them are actually in the healthcare, and 25 are in the high tech. I got some examples. Variantix, this is a technology that was developed by Noam Shomron. Noam is a computational biology. I think he's from the medical school, right? It's a and the Segol School. And thank you for correcting me, Dana. And Variantix actually is a startup company, operates in Boston. And they have taken the fact that you can actually have a sequencing done in less than 4 hours and less than $1,000. You can very quickly actually get your genome sequenced, and they will actually run an analysis and will give you an evaluation of genes you have to be aware of and things you may need to change as far as your the way you conduct your life. I can tell you that this scientist now applied for another grant, one of the translational grants. It's a blood test that enabled to, in pregnancy, the first 3 months are the most, the riskier one. And there is, how do you say ra'elet hirayon? Nobody knows. There are several I would say challenges in the first 3 months, and there are no way to, if you don't discover those challenges in the first 3 months, the pregnancy can be at risk, or the pregnancy could be at risk at the end of the day. And he developed a blood test that allows to identify those, we're going to get the name in English in a minute. It's diabetes, and the second one, I forgot, Dana will tell us in a second. So this is Variantix. I would have never guessed, but yeah. Synvaccine is another technology that was developed, again, computational biology, Tamir Tuller. It's actually using vaccines to fight cancer, again, a space which is very hot. This is, by the way, one of the companies that made it to the top 10 in the competition on Wednesday. The second one is quite therapeutic. A distinguished professor, Dan Pe'er, and Rimona Margalit. This is a company that already raised $20 million. It's targeted drug delivery using nanoparticle, addressing targeted therapeutic treatment through this technology. Company is doing extremely well. Just moved its headquarters to Boston and invested about $10 million in opening labs. And Dan Pe'er, by the way, I think came to us from Harvard, if I'm not mistaken, and was and I think still also active in the FDA. This is Brainstorm, Danny Offen. We're privileged to have all these guys today in the room. Danny Offen this year is going to be either extremely happy or extremely upset. But in a couple of months, we have phase 2 clinical trial results are publishing in 3 centers in the US. This is essentially stem cell therapy. The first indication is ALS. There could be multiple, but right now it's ALS, and I think the company is working on other indications related to the brain, like autism, etc. It's all in the public domain. This is a publicly traded company. Very exciting stuff. Neurophage was actually founded by Yoni Solomon, who is the son of Becca Solomon. And Neurophage just raised $100 million for human trials in the US. Again, quite a fascinating. This is again another technology that came from here. Some exciting stuff. Some things in the pipeline, and in fact, I'm going to leave some time for questions. These are several technologies. As you can see, we have in cell therapy, in gene therapy, in small molecules and peptides. I won't go into details. I'm also not the right guy to give you the technological overview here. But Hagit Eldar Finkelman, it's basically utilizing or working on a target which is the GSK3. And right now, as you can see, we have done in vivo efficacy on several CNS indications with some fairly positive results. This is another amazing technology of neuropathic pain, a very tough space. Almost everybody failed. I can tell you that we brought this technology to the Momentum Fund with $1 million investment, and the scientific committee actually rejected the investment. What we did with our team, we developed a program for CRO. We went to a CRO outside with about $80,000 investment, one of our funding venue tools. And following that, now we have got, I can tell you, I won't get into details, we've got FutureX, which is an incubator in Israel with about $2.5 million investment, looking to invest, Eli Lilly, Pfizer, and I think I'm missing here Novartis, which is not here, but Novartis also expressed interest, and we're meeting with them on Wednesday at the Biomed. So quite amazing, just by actually taking the asset, packaging it, going to a CRO and showing some preliminary result, that by itself brought the asset to a much higher value than it was just 3 months ago. Quite amazing. And this is a scientist that have been working on this forever, Bernard. You guys know it. Now, I've got many more examples, but I think it just gives you, it lights the imagination in terms of what are the things that can be done. And with that, I'd like to open up the floor for questions that you may have.